Greetings, my friends. My name is Stan Houston. I'm the founder and leader of What It Takes Radio, a podcast and publishing company, and it's my privilege, indeed my pleasure, to welcome you to perhaps one of the more important programs I've ever put together in my long life of radio, and that is just simply More Power to You. And it's based on this incredible, wonderful book, which I'm going through about the second and third time, called Power Praying by David Chotka. And in our first episode, David introduced himself and the whole idea of we can hear God's Spirit by praying Jesus' prayer. And it's how to learn how to be people of power and purpose and poise, because we listen to God and He can speak to us as we pray the very prayer that Jesus taught us. And we learned that even the Our Father, there's so much in that word, in that term. And now we will continue, hallowed. Hallowed be thy name. Now let me tell you, I cut the program off a little bit shorter than David wanted to for a very good reason. Have you ever heard of what's called a TED Talk? And these world-class talks are about 20 minutes. And what I learned in 20 minutes from David's conversation with me was so incredibly powerful and challenging that I just said, we're going to stop now. We'll continue on later, but this message so deeply moved me as I heard him put it together that I just simply said, this is life-changing, and I believe that will be the case for you. So it will be a little bit shorter than normal, but it'll be long on life and purpose for you. So, once again, it is my profound pleasure to introduce my mentor at this stage in life, and I believe someone who can help us all change our lives as we learn how to deeply pray the prayer that Jesus taught us. Here's David.
Well, thank you, Stan. It's great to be with you once again. I know that last week we had a wonderful session, an introduction to this amazing prayer called the Lord's Prayer.
Indeed, we did. And I was overwhelmed by just, again, in church, said the Lord's Prayer. And when I said, Our Father, I just stopped because all of a sudden there was such realization of the power of the fact to say, Our Father. David, that overwhelmed me in the power of it. So I'll just leave it at that. But absolutely, that was the most powerful thing. Many things. And in fact, I would say, please go back and listen to that at least 3 times. But remember, Our Father, what incredible privilege we have. Yes.
It is. So I wanted to go a step further with this. I gave you the basic gist of my first discovery of what I didn't know about the Lord's Prayer that expanded my mind and caused my mind to almost explode. And that was the power that's attached to Jesus' sonship and how we get that by way of impartation from Him Himself. But somebody asked me to describe this in a visual. So I'm going to try and give you that picture.
Look,
so imagine,
I'm a picture kind of guy.
Okay. Well, if you can imagine like a 28-foot wall, 8 feet high, let's do it that way, a blank wall. And let's have every chapter of the Matthew's Gospel put on the wall so that we have one chapter for every foot 8 feet high, and make sure that the Lord's Prayer in chapter 6 is in dark text and it's 3 times the size. So then I would go, if I was teaching a seminar and I had this on a wall, I would say, what's your favorite color? And you'd tell me a color. So what's your favorite color, Stan?
I'm purple.
Okay, so we'll take purple and we would circle the word Father. And we would make it in purple. And then we would draw lines to all the different parts of Matthew's Gospel where the word Father is used. And you would be astonished at how quickly the wall becomes purple. So then I would walk up to some other person in the congregation and I'd say, well, what is your favorite color? But it can't be purple. So someone would say another color, let's say yellow. So then I would take the next key word, which is heaven. I would then circle it in yellow, and I would draw lines all across the wall to all the different places in Matthew's Gospel where the word heaven is used. And once again, everybody in the room would be astonished at how much yellow is on the wall. Now we got two colors, purple and yellow, and some of these are overlapping and producing a different kind of color. And then I'd walk up to a third person and I'd say, what is your favorite color? As long as it isn't yellow and purple. So they'd give me another one. Let's say red. And we'd circle the word will. Now, you know this. There are thousands of books on the will of God. And if you look at how will works in Matthew's gospel, you're going to see red all over the wall, emanating from that first line of the Lord's Prayer. And even before you get to the second line, you have a rainbow on the wall. The whole point here is that if you continue doing that with the key words of Jesus' prayer, you discover that every single key thing that Jesus ever taught is now plastered across the wall, and it's collapsed into a single prayer that we have come to call the Lord's Prayer. It was never intended by Jesus to be something that we just said at the end of the prayer meeting. It was intended to be a rabbinical teaching device. In other words, here is the guts of my teaching. I am reducing that to a memory device that you can commit to memory so that you remember the key things. And when you start to pray, you enter into the relationship that I already have with my Father, and then you start to pray the things that I believe in because you are abiding in my teaching and led by my Spirit, who is the one who imparts the ability for you to be able to call God Father anyway. And it's a remarkable thing. The whole wall will just be covered with color. The these and the ands and the buts aren't going to be embraced into color. Everything else on the wall is going to be color saturated because the purpose of the Lord's Prayer was to create the ability for people in a non-writing culture, mostly a verbal culture,
Yes.
to remember everything that Jesus taught so that they could shape their prayer lives around his purposes.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Oh, you what? Well, actually, I'm still not quite caught up to what I just said to you about this. And what I very often do is I resort to other methods. And because when I first became a believer, somebody said, oh, by the way, I use this method, and they would name one. And somebody else would say, oh, by the way, you can pray the Psalms, which is very helpful. And someone else would say, well, I use Acts, and I use that for the longest time. And what I discovered is none of those methods are found in Jesus' teaching. What I found, and I'm a faithful Christ follower, and I believe in the gospel. I believe in Jesus, and I've been a Christian believer since I was 16. I've been intentional about having a daily prayer life from the moment that I got saved, and I didn't really begin to understand this until 24 years in.
Okay.
24 years. Wow.
Okay. Now I'm just going to sit here and enjoy where we go from here. So,
well,
please.
Well, the Lord's Prayer is actually it really can be structured into 6 separate movements.
Okay, let's do that.
Well,
okay.
the first, actually, I used, I don't know if this is fair or unfair because it's English. I don't know if it works in Spanish or Chinese or French or anything like that, but I use the word prayer to develop an acrostic to give me a memory device. And so because I use Acts for years because it was a memory device. And if I think of the word prayer, I think praise the Father, request the kingdom, ask for provision, yield my sins, engage the enemy, rejoice in God's victory.
Oh my goodness.
And
goodness.
That's how it works. So praise is our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I mean, of course, you know that from Sunday school. I know that from Sunday school. But what you're doing is you're deliberately focusing your attention on who God is and on what his name is and on glorying him and on our future destiny. Now, I don't know how many prayer meetings you've been to. As a pastor, I've led the prayer meeting. I've been at prayer meetings that are especially called for special purposes. We've done fundraising prayer meetings, and we've done emergency prayer meetings for people in trouble. We did something when someone was in a car accident. There was one time where we called a fasting and prayer day because of a terrible thing that had happened in my church, etc. Almost all the prayer meetings that I have attended had to do with somebody's need. Just about all of them. And invariably, when I would go to the prayer meeting, and I did this myself for fully decades, we're talking decades and decades of this, we would come there with a prepared list. And we'd start off by saying, the following people need to get saved. Oh, the following people are in the hospital. Oh, the following people have a financial need. So-and-so needs a job. We got to pray about the situation overseas with our missionary in that country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we would develop this list. And then in earnest, we would sing a hymn of praise, or we would start right at it, and we'd go straight to the need. Jesus tells us to go straight to the Father. And when we go straight to the Father, to stay there until we are conscious and experiencing his presence, so that the Spirit's presence then guide us into praying around the things that would cause the kingdom of our Lord and his will to advance. Now, that's a very, very different framework than the way that most of us do this. And I have met people who are, let me back this up. There was a season where traditional churches were being replaced by churches that had effusive praise, and the effusive praise would last anywhere from 15 minutes to half an hour. And those churches began to grow. Why? Because they tapped into the first part of the Lord's Prayer. They would focus intentionally on getting themselves present to the presence until they were consciously aware of the presence of the Spirit through an impartation of peace or joy or focus on God's goodness. Churches that focused on praise for about a 15-year window had those churches start to grow. And every part of who they were was involved in sensory worship. And it doesn't matter if they're Baptist or Presbyterian or Catholic or Mennonite or Pentecostal or whatever. The churches that focused in on knowing God's presence first succeeded. Why? Because that's how Jesus tells us to pray. Don't start with your list. In fact, don't start with your needs. Start by recognizing that you have been melded together with everything that belongs to who Jesus is. Start by recognizing that he gives us the ability to call God Father, and that we enter into the throne room of heaven. And then start by asking God how you can, in any way, shape, or form, bring holiness to bear on your life to hallow his existence. And when you are there, adore him. Absolutely get yourself focused in on his praise. And after you are consciously aware of the presence, move into the second movement, which is that God's kingdom be advanced and that his will be done. Now, there's lots and lots and lots of teaching on kingdom and will, and we're going to be unpacking some of that in the days to come. But most Christians think of the kingdom as something that's coming at the end of time. Most people do. If you examine the phrase kingdom in the teaching of Jesus, you will discover that there is an already not yet reality attached to the use of that word. There is the Holy Spirit who is attached to the advancement of God's kingdom, and there's the unclean spirit who is attacking God's kingdom. And when you are praying for the kingdom to come and for the will to be done, you're actually praying for the disarming of everything that is evil and contrary to the will of God to be vanquished. And we haven't even got to our own personal issues just yet. Because give us this day our daily bread is further on down the line. We're actually praying for something quite different. And you got to know, I don't know how many prayer meetings I've been to where there is no reference to disarming the powers of darkness. It's all about so-and-so's cancer. It's all about my neighbor who lost his wife. It's all about the fact that I need to work. I have to pay my bills. It's all about the fact that I have this chronic headache and it just doesn't go away and I can't think. And oh, God, would you please heal me? It's all about our issues. And Jesus doesn't want us to start there. So we get to our issues in the third line of the Lord's Prayer. So here's the framework. The first thing is God in his glory. And you stay there until you feel it. The second part is the advance of God's rule, his kingdom, the unpacking of the powers of darkness, and the advance of God's kingdom of love and grace and holiness and truth and joy. And then the third line is, and actually, the way we even say it doesn't make sense. The third line is where we bring our issues before him. But if you look at Jesus' teaching on the kingdom, he doesn't say, oh, by the way, tell me what you need and I'll supply your needs. He says, seek first the kingdom, and then all these things will be added to you. So you can tell him you need daily bread after you have focused in on what God needs to get the work done. In other words, give me the things that are necessary to accomplish the kingdom work while I'm praying about the kingdom work. And oh, by the way, it would be helpful if I had some bread today.
Well, David, what you have done for me right now, and like I said, I'm eager to hear more, but I'm just going to interject my own personal revelation at this moment. As I've shared with you, my wife and I are particularly at this stage in our life in a situation which we're trying to help a special needs grandson that has been diagnosed at the age of 6 with a special need that is going to affect him the rest of his life. In fact, that's part of the reason we made an adjustment so we're closer to him. And right now we are going through finding a school, a special school for him. And that's been our prayer. And there's a part of me right now that wants to run back home to my wife, Karen, and say, no, we're not going to start there.
Well, I mean, but you know this, the issues of life are real. I have a handicapped daughter.
I understand that, and Jesus understands, but I'm so yes, but you're saying is Jesus says, I'll get there and I'll be there, but start here.
Yeah, and actually,
thank you for that.
Well, in fairness to the teaching of Jesus, the Lord doesn't say seek only the kingdom. He says, seek first the kingdom. All right. And legitimate needs are legitimate needs. And you just named one that's very real. I mean, you know, your daughter's been trying to raise that kid. And you know, there's financial needs and there's emotional needs and there's spiritual needs and there's physical needs, et cetera, et cetera. All those things are real. In fact, in this book here that I wrote, Healing Prayers, God's Idea, the picture at the back of the book is a picture of my daughter in a wheelchair.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a daughter in a wheelchair, and you have to know there's not a day where I don't pray about how I'm going to make sure that that girl has what she needs, and I do that. But the teaching of the Lord's Prayer is that you don't make that the center. In fact, in the Power of Praying book, I talk about the difference between making need the center and making God the center. Now, as we go along, we'll talk about that. But if you make God the center, then God promises to take care of your needs. If you make need the center, need becomes a sucking parasite, and it focuses you on what you can or cannot do rather than on the God who supplies our needs. We make need the God of our attention. And so the whole point of the Lord's Prayer is to take need and put it into proper perspective. Need becomes the secondary issue as the center of our life is focused in on advancing God's rule on earth and making sure that his holiness is proclaimed.
Wow. Thank you.
I don't know. I'm not quite sure what to do with what I just told you, because I find myself also wanting to default to the need. And in fact, there's never a day when I don't name the fact. Oh, by the way, I'm in this faith-based ministry. Where am I going to find my donors? Right? Oh, by the way, I'm in this place where I have to make sure that my daughter's scooter works. Oh, by the way, my son is getting launched in life. He's getting married next year. How am I going to pay for that wedding? I mean, the last one's kind of joyful. it's more than kind of joyful. It's delightful. He's found the love of his life. But, the two families are going to split the costs, so how am I going to pay for that? So whether the need is joyful, whether the need is ordinary, I just bought groceries. So I went out and bought groceries because I need to, right? And so life continues. All of us have these things that are in front of us. Many of us have depressing issues that we're surrounded by, and the temptation is to default to paying attention to the need rather than to default to looking at the God who wants us to focus our resources on expanding his influence, and the byproduct is that God cares for us. Oh.
Well, David, I'm looking at my time here and things of this nature. I'm going to ask us to, at this time, because this has been so overwhelming, could you kind of bring a final thought for us today and anticipate some of the good stuff that's going to come to us? Okay?
Well, I only got halfway through the grid. Well, I think the best thought that we can have in the middle of all of this is that the Lord's Prayer is intended to lift us above our despair so that we can focus on the God who is the author of all things, rather than us praying about what causes us trouble. What the Lord wants us to do is to focus on the God who is the author of grace, who then brings us to a place where he begins to set into motion the things that he wants done and supplies for his servants. I think that's the best takeaway I can give you on this one.
Well, David, this has been very powerful for me and very personal for me, and I can speak for many people to say that has been, I'm sure you have many more things to say, but that has been the key, the aha in my life that I want to go out and do it right now. And so I want to thank you for that. So that is very, very good. I am grateful for that revelation. And now, where are we going to go next?
Well, I will finish up what I'll do is I'll quickly recap what we did before.
Okay.
And I will walk you through the other three movements so that people can understand that the Lord's Prayer is a comprehensive unity. I do want people to understand that when they're praying the Lord's Prayer, it's not a prayer divided in two parts. Most of the interpreters see it as a two-part thing. God need at the top, human need at the bottom. That actually doesn't do justice to the framework of the prayer. So I'm going to unpack the framework in our next session, and then we're going to take each line one at a time.
Very good. I'm looking forward to that. And so thank you very much. And we are going to move into this week with new understanding. And I would encourage you, just do it. Just do it right now. As you're starting to pray this morning, this evening, as I will do, I will start not only the Lord's Prayer, but an element of praise and help us. You'll go through again the acronym PRAYER, and we'll focus on that until it's a part of our very being. That's correct.
Thanks, Stan. I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you. And do you see what I mean? Why I was so deeply moved. My wife Karen and I have been praying profoundly for a special needs grandson. And immediately after we had recorded this time together, I went back to my wife Karen and I says, you know, we are praying the list. We have a long list of God. We want him to do this for our grandson. And I said, we have to learn to hallowed be his name. We have to praise him. We have to honor him. We don't just bring him our lists, we bring him our very presence and our praise and our worship. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to pray differently for our children. We're certainly got our list of things we want for them, but they're also a part of us that needs to walk in the comfort and peace of his presence that will come to us, knowing that he is listening and that Jesus is actually praying for us too. And so I just pass that good word on to you. If you'd like to reach out to us, spiritequipped.com, spiritequipped.com. We would love to hear from you and be able to know how we could better serve you. This podcast, we're going to go for a long time, we hope. Someone says maybe until Jesus himself shows up and comes, because the word of Lord is powerful, and we want that kind of power in our lives. So stick with us. We'll be having episode 3 coming up in just another week. All the best and blessings to you. Until that time, bye for now.